The warning lights flickered across every screen in the pan-solar communications array. Dr. James Mitchell stared at the incoming signal with trembling hands. After 200 years of scanning the stars, humanity had finally received a message from another intelligent species. The signal came from deep space, beyond the outer colonies. It took 3 days to translate, but when the computers finally decoded it, the message was clear. Someone out there needed help. Someone was dying. The Zeltari Empire was fleeing from something they called the consuming dark. Their worlds were falling one by one. Millions of refugees drifted through space in damaged ships, searching for sanctuary. The images that came with the signal showed desperate faces pressed against viewing ports, children crying in their mothers' arms, old ones wrapped in thin blankets shivering in cold corridors. The creatures looked almost familiar. They had fur like earth mammals, large eyes that reflected fear and hope. Their hands reached toward the camera as if begging across the light years. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the UN Space Council and played the transmission. The chamber fell silent. Diplomats from every nation watched the suffering on the screens. Some wiped tears from their eyes. "This is our moment," Chen said, her voice steady. "For 2 centuries we've wondered if we were alone. Now we know we're not, and we know that someone needs us." The debate lasted 3 days. Some argued humanity should be cautious. Others worried about the cost. But in the end, compassion won. Earth would send help. It was the right thing to do. The mobilization happened faster than anyone thought possible. Nations that had argued for decades suddenly worked together with single purpose. Shipyards on Luna ran triple shifts. Mars Colony donated half its medical supplies. The asteroid miners contributed raw materials for the mission. They assembled the largest fleet humanity had ever built. 67 ships loaded with food, medicine, and hope. Hospital ships equipped to handle alien biology. Transport vessels carrying prefabricated habitats. Engineering ships with tools to repair the damaged Zeltari fleet. The fleet even included peacekeeping forces, but they carried only light weapons. This was a rescue mission, not a military operation. The soldiers wore blue helmets and trained to distribute aid, not to fight wars. Admiral Chen personally commanded the flagship Compassion's Light. She was a veteran of the Mars Rebellion peacekeeping mission, known for her patience and steady hand. She believed deeply that humanity's future lay in proving itself worthy of the stars. "We're not just saving aliens," she told her crew before departure. "We're showing the universe who we are. We're showing that humans care." The journey took 3 months. The fleet traveled to the Kepler 442 system, where the Zeltari had asked to meet. During the long voyage, crews practiced first contact protocols. They learned basic Zeltari phrases. Medical teams studied the biological data the aliens had sent. There was excitement throughout the fleet. Humanity was about to make history. When they finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the Zeltari fleet was waiting. Hundreds of vessels drifted in formation around a small moon. Their ships looked damaged, just as the messages had shown. Hull plating was scorched. Some vessels leaked atmosphere into space. "They really are in trouble," Chen's executive officer observed. Chen opened communications. "Zeltari fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth. We've come to help." The response came quickly. A Zeltari commander appeared on screen, his face showing relief. "Humans of Earth, you have traveled far. We are grateful. Please allow us to approach. Our people are sick. Our ships are failing." Chen looked at her tactical officer. "Lower shields. Let them see we mean no harm." Some of her officers hesitated. The tactical computer showed the Zeltari vessels moving into tight formation. But Chen insisted. This was a moment of trust. The human fleet powered down its defensive shields. It was a gesture of pure faith. That's when everything changed. The Zeltari vessels suddenly accelerated. Their engines flared with power that damaged ships should not have possessed. They moved with military precision, surrounding the human fleet in seconds. "Admiral, they're targeting us," the tactical officer shouted. Before Chen could respond, the Zeltari fired. Strange pulses of electromagnetic energy washed over the human ships. Every electrical system died. Lights went dark. Engines stopped. Life support switched to emergency backup. The human fleet hung helpless in space. Boarding pods launched from the Zeltari vessels like swarms of insects. They clamped onto human hulls and burned through. Zeltari soldiers poured into the corridors wearing battle armor and carrying weapons. They weren't refugees. They were warriors. The lightly armed peacekeepers tried to resist, but they were overwhelmed. The Zelthari moved with the efficiency of a species that had done this many times before. They executed officers who fought back. They rounded up crew members at gunpoint. They stripped the human ships of technology, loading equipment onto their own vessels. Some human ships managed to restart their engines. A few captains made the desperate choice to engage emergency faster than light jumps, even though regulations said it was dangerous to jump so close to other vessels. They had to warn Earth. 12 ships escaped. 55 were captured or destroyed. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge surrounded by Zelthari soldiers. Blood ran down her face from a cut above her eye. Her crew lay on the deck, hands bound behind their backs. A Zelthari commander studied her with cold eyes. "Your ships are impressive," he said in perfect English. "Your technology will serve the Empire well. Your people will work our factories until they die." Chen spat blood at his feet. "You sent a distress call. You showed us children. We showed you what you wanted to see," the commander replied. "Soft species always respond to suffering. It makes you predictable. It makes you weak." Chen's hand moved toward the communications panel. A Zelthari guard struck her and she fell to her knees. But she had already opened a channel. "Earth," she whispered into her collar microphone. "Tell them what mercy costs. Tell them we tried to do the right thing. Tell them—" A rifle butt struck the back of her head and everything went dark. 47,000 humans died or disappeared that day. 23 ships were destroyed. 31 were captured intact with all their technology. The few vessels that escaped carried testimony of the massacre. The message reached Earth 3 months later. Humanity heard the screams of its children dying in the dark. And something ancient and terrible awakened in the human heart. The footage played on every screen across every human world. The escape pods had carried more than just survivors. They carried recordings. People watched Admiral Chen's final transmission. They saw the Zelthari commander laugh as he discussed harvesting human technology. They heard the screams of crew members being dragged away. They witnessed the cold execution of officers who tried to protect their people. The video ended with a view from an escape pod, looking back at the human ships. Beautiful vessels that had carried hope now sat dark and dead, covered with alien boarding craft like parasites on a corpse. The reaction was immediate and universal. On Earth, crowds gathered in city squares and stood in silence. On Mars Colony, miners put down their tools and wept. On Europa Station, engineers watched the footage and then quietly walked to their workshops. They had work to do. Within 24 hours, the United Nations held an emergency session. The vote was unanimous. The peacekeeping charter was suspended. In its place, something new emerged. They called it the Terran Defense Concordat. Every nation contributed. Every colony participated. Humanity had one goal now, never again. The military mobilization began immediately. Shipyards that had built exploration vessels retooled for war. Scientists who had studied distant stars turned their attention to weapons. Factories that had made habitat modules now produced armor plating. Humanity discovered something about itself. When pushed, when threatened, when its children were taken, it could move with terrifying speed. The Concordat's intelligence division analyzed every second of footage from the massacre. They found something important. Before the Zelthari jammed communications, one human ship had intercepted an alien transmission. The Zelthari had sent detailed reports back to their empire, information about human technology, data on Earth's defenses, maps of the solar system. The conclusion was obvious. This had been a scouting mission. The real invasion was coming. Computer analysis estimated 18 months until a Zelthari war fleet could reach Earth. 18 months to prepare for extinction. Captain Marcus Rivera stood in the recruitment center and watched the lines of volunteers stretch around the building. He had retired from the Marines 5 years ago to spend time with his family. His wife and 2 daughters had been visiting the Mars colony when the Concordat called for volunteers. They had been aboard the medical ship Mercy's Hand. Rivera signed his enlistment papers with a steady hand. He was 43 years old, which made him ancient by military standards. But the Concordat wasn't being picky. They needed every person who could fight. More importantly, they needed people who understood what they were fighting for. The scientific community worked miracles. Research projects that would normally take decades were completed in months. The Zelthari had used electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable the human fleet. Human scientists studied the recordings and reverse-engineered the effect. Then they improved it. Dr. Elizabeth Park led a team that created humanity's first real weapons of war. The funding was unlimited. The ethics committees were dissolved. Every dark project that had been shelved as too dangerous was pulled out and examined. "We tried to be good," Park said at a press conference. "We tried to be peaceful. They punished us for it. So now we'll show them what humans become when you take away our reasons to be good." The asteroid belt became a factory. Thousands of automated mining drones stripped rocks for raw materials. Construction ships assembled vessels at incredible speed. New designs emerged weekly. The first batch of warships was ready in 6 months. They looked nothing like the exploration vessels humanity had built before. These were angular, ugly things covered in weapons. They had thick armor and powerful engines. They were built for one purpose: war. The Concordate Strategy Division developed the Hellfire Protocol. The name was chosen carefully. It was a promise and a threat. Captain Rivera was given command of the destroyer Unforgiven. His crew was a mix of veterans and volunteers who had lost family in the massacre. They trained constantly, pushing themselves and their ship to the limits. "They think we're soft," Rivera told his crew. "They think compassion is weakness. We're going to teach them the difference between choosing to be kind and being unable to fight." The first contact with Zelthari forces came 9 months after the massacre. A Zelthari scout group was mapping the outer solar system, probably preparing for the invasion. They encountered a human patrol. The Zelthari expected an easy fight. They had crushed humanity before. What they met was something new. The human ships moved with aggressive precision. They used tactics the Zelthari had never seen. When Zelthari vessels tried to use their electromagnetic pulse weapons, the human ships absorbed the energy and redirected it back at them. The battle lasted 17 minutes. All 6 Zelthari scouts were destroyed. The human patrol took no damage. More importantly, the humans took no prisoners. The Concordate had made a decision. This was a war of extermination. The Zelthari had started it. Humanity would finish it. News of the battle reached the Zelthari Empire. Their commanders were confused. These weren't the same timid creatures they had ambushed. Something had changed. Over the next few months, more skirmishes occurred. Each time the Zelthari lost, human weapons were devastating. Human tactics were brutal. The peaceful explorers were gone, replaced by something that fought with cold fury. The Concordate introduced new weapons that terrified even human observers. Reaper drones were AI-controlled ships packed with explosives. They targeted bridge sections specifically, killing command crews. When Zelthari captains saw Reapers approaching, they knew they had minutes to live. Nanite swarms were released into space near Zelthari vessels. The microscopic machines ate through hull plating like acid, creating thousands of tiny holes. Ships lost atmosphere and pressure. Crews died gasping in the cold. The Concordate's Psychological Warfare Division broadcast messages into Zelthari space. The transmissions showed what happened to Zelthari ships that attacked humans. The videos were graphic. They were meant to be. "You wanted to see what humans do when afraid," the messages said. "That was us afraid. You haven't seen us angry yet." Captain Rivera led a special mission 14 months after the massacre. Intelligence had located a Zelthari processing station where they held human prisoners. The facility was heavily defended, but the Concordate didn't care about the cost. They were bringing their people home. Rivera's strike force hit the station fast and hard. Marines in powered armor breached the facility and fought through corridors. The Zelthari defenders were skilled, but the humans fought like demons. They found Admiral Chen in a detention cell. She was thin and scarred, but alive. Around her were 3,000 other survivors, broken but breathing. Rivera personally carried Chen to the evacuation ship. "Ma'am," he said, "we're taking you home." Chen looked at him with haunted eyes. "What have we become?" "What we needed to be," Rivera replied. Before they left, the Marines rigged the entire facility with explosives. The Zelthari commanders watched helplessly as their station turned into a funeral pyre. A message was broadcast from the exploding station. It went out across all Zelthari frequencies. "This is what happens when you take our people. This is what happens when you mistake our kindness for weakness. We are coming for you, all of you." The Zelthari Empire received the message and felt something they had not felt in centuries: fear. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen recovered in a military hospital. She was promoted and given command of Sol Systems Defense. The Zelthari invasion fleet was 4 months away. Chen stood on the bridge of the new flagship Retribution and looked at the assembled fleet. 200 warships filled the space around Earth. Thousands of weapon platforms dotted the asteroid belt. Millions of mines drifted in carefully planned patterns. They wanted a war, she said quietly. Let's give them one they'll never forget. The trap was set. Humanity waited. The Zelthari invasion fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system with confidence. 300 warships, each carrying the pride of an empire that had conquered 12 species. They had used the same tactic every time. Send a distress call, ambush the rescuers, harvest their technology, and enslave their people. It had always worked. Admiral Krell stood on his command ship and studied the scan results. The humans had clearly been busy. Their defensive positions were obvious. Weapon platforms around the planets, ships clustered near Earth, mines scattered through the asteroid belt. Predictable, Krell said to his officers. They defend their home world. They think like prey species. What Krell didn't know was that the obvious defenses were bait. The real trap was invisible. The Zelthari fleet moved confidently toward the inner system. They passed the orbit of Jupiter, then Saturn, then they entered the asteroid belt, where the human defenses seemed weakest. Admiral Chen sat in her command chair aboard Retribution and watched the enemy fleet move into position. She had spent months planning this moment. Every calculation had been checked, every weapon tested, every mine placed with care. All ships, she said calmly, execute Hellfire Protocol. The asteroid belt came alive. Thousands of weapon platforms that had been camouflaged as rocks suddenly activated. Railguns that could throw metal slugs at a fraction of light speed opened fire. Missiles streaked through space by the hundreds. Laser batteries created a web of deadly light, but the real surprise was the mines. They weren't simple explosives. Human engineers had developed something special. The mines released clouds of metal fragments moving at enormous speeds. When a Zelthari ship passed through the cloud, millions of tiny projectiles struck its hull. Individually, each fragment did little damage. Together, they shredded armor like paper. The Zelthari fleet formation collapsed in minutes. Ships exploded. Others tumbled out of control, their engines destroyed. Captains screamed orders, but there was nowhere to hide in the asteroid belt. Then the human fleet attacked. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly behind the Zelthari formation. They had been hiding on the other side of Mars, waiting for the perfect moment. Captain Rivera's ship Unforgiven led the charge. His weapons officer had one command painted above his station. Remember the Mercy's hand? They remembered. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was a slaughter. The Zelthari fought bravely, but they were trapped and outnumbered. Humanity used every weapon it had developed. Plasma cannons that melted through armor, kinetic bombardment systems that struck with the force of small nuclear weapons, antimatter torpedoes that erased ships from existence. When it was over, 90 Zelthari ships were destroyed. Another 40 were crippled and captured. The rest retreated at maximum speed, leaving their damaged vessels behind. Admiral Krell's flagship was among the captured ships. Marines boarded and found him on his bridge, surrounded by dead crew members. He had fought to the last moment. Rivera personally took Krell into custody. The alien admiral stared at him with something like respect. You were supposed to be weak, Krell said. Our intelligence said you were compassionate, peaceful. We were, Rivera replied. You changed that. Krell was brought before Admiral Chen. She studied him for a long moment. Why? She asked. Why did you do it? Why betray our trust? Krell seemed genuinely confused by the question. Because you were weak enough to trust. Because your compassion made you prey. This is how the galaxy works, human. The strong take from the weak. Chen nodded slowly. Then let me show you what happens when you make the weak become strong. She ordered the captured Zelthari ships to be studied. Human engineers swarmed over them, learning everything they could. Within weeks, humanity understood Zelthari technology better than the Zelthari did. But Chen knew the battle was only the beginning. The Zelthari Empire still existed. They would rebuild. They would come again, unless humanity struck first. The Terran Defense Concordat held an emergency session. The question was simple. Should humanity stay in the solar system and defend? Or should they take the war to the enemy? The vote was unanimous. Humanity would attack. Operation Prometheus began 3 months after the Battle of the Belt. A massive fleet assembled at Mars, 150 warships, 500 support vessels, 50,000 Marines trained for ground combat. The target was Zelthari space itself. The goal was to destroy their shipyards, free their slaves, and shatter their empire. Admiral Chen commanded the fleet from her flagship. Captain Rivera led the ground forces. They had one mission: make the Zelthari regret ever hearing the name human. The fleet's first target was Talaxis 4, a mining colony on the edge of Zelthari space. Intelligence said the Zelthari used slave labor there. Millions of creatures from conquered species worked in terrible conditions, mining resources for the Empire. The human fleet arrived without warning. Zelthari defense stations were destroyed in the first 10 minutes. The colony's military garrison never had a chance. Marines landed and secured the mining facilities. They found the slaves huddled in their barracks, terrified. The creatures were insectoid with multiple arms and eyes. They called themselves the Morn. Rivera walked into the largest barracks and looked at hundreds of frightened faces. He removed his helmet so they could see he was different from the Zelthari. "We're humans from Earth," he said. His translator unit converted the words to Morn language. "The Zelthari attacked us. We're attacking them back. You're free now." The Morn stared at him in silence. Then one of them, an older individual with scarred chitin, stepped forward. "Free?" the Morn asked. "What does that mean?" "It means you don't work for them anymore," Rivera said. "It means you can choose your own path." "And if we choose to help you fight them?" the Morn asked. Rivera smiled. "Then welcome to the war." The Morn provided intelligence that changed everything. They explained that the Zelthari Empire was not as strong as it appeared. It was held together by fear. Dozens of conquered species existed throughout Zelthari space, all of them waiting for a chance to rebel. They just needed someone to show them it was possible. Over the next months, the human fleet struck at Zelthari targets across multiple systems. Each time they liberated slaves. Each time they sent the same message: join us, fight with us, earn your freedom. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly had hope. The Avathari, bird-like creatures who were skilled pilots, contributed stealth ships to the growing fleet. The Kryn, who lived in water, offered their expertise in biotechnology and medicine. An alliance formed. They called themselves the Liberation Front. Humanity was the sword. The freed species were the support. The Zelthari Empire began to fracture. Their slave species rebelled. Their colonies fell to human attacks. Their carefully constructed power structure collapsed. The Zelthari High Command made a desperate decision. They would make a stand at their primary shipyard orbiting Zelthar Prime's moon. If the humans wanted to destroy the Empire, they would have to pay a terrible price. 200 Zelthari warships gathered at the shipyard. It was the largest concentration of enemy forces humanity had faced. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display and knew this would be the hardest battle yet. But there was no choice. As long as the shipyard existed, the Zelthari could rebuild. "All ships," she ordered. "Prepare for combat. This ends today." The Battle of Zelthar Prime's moon began at dawn local time. 200 Zelthari vessels against 180 coalition ships. The space around the moon became a hurricane of weapons fire and explosions. Humanity unveiled its newest weapon. Ragnarok cannons were experimental superlasers that required 3 ships to operate together. When fired, they could crack a moon. The Zelthari watched in horror as the cannon charged. They threw everything they had at the 3 ships forming the weapon, but Liberation Front vessels protected them. The cannon fired. A beam of pure energy struck the shipyard and burned through it like a torch through paper. Secondary explosions rippled across the moon's surface as fuel depots and ammunition stores detonated. But the battle was far from over. The Zelthari fought with desperate fury. They knew if they lost here, their empire was finished. Captain Rivera led a ground assault on the shipyard's command center. His Marines fought through corridors and cargo bays. The Zelthari defenders were skilled and motivated. They fought for every meter. Rivera's unit took heavy casualties. Good soldiers died in the cold metal hallways, but the humans kept pushing forward. After 8 hours of brutal combat, Rivera reached the command center. The Zelthari commander inside activated the self-destruct system rather than surrender. Rivera and his Marines barely escaped before the entire section exploded. When the battle ended, the shipyard was destroyed. 60 Zelthari ships were wrecked. The rest retreated to Zelthar Prime itself. Humanity had won, but the cost was terrible. 12,000 Marines and spacers died in the battle. Admiral Chen walked through the medical bays afterward, looking at the wounded and the dead. Was it worth it? Her executive officer asked quietly. Chen looked at him with tired eyes. Ask me when this is over. With the shipyard gone, the Zelthari could no longer build new ships. Their client species, seeing the Empire's weakness, began full rebellions. Zelthari commanders fought each other for dwindling resources. The Empire was dying. But the Zelthari High Command still held their homeworld, and they still had billions of civilians to use as shields. The final battle was coming. The Coalition fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zelthar Prime system. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge and looked at the planet on her screens. It was beautiful. Blue oceans and green continents not unlike Earth. Cities glittered on the night side like jewels. Somewhere down there, 4 billion Zelthari civilians lived their lives. And somewhere down there, the High Command was preparing for humanity's arrival. Chen's tactical officer brought up the defense scan. Admiral, they have orbital fortresses, thousands of defense satellites, and at least 50 warships. The planet's surface is covered with anti-air batteries. And? Chen asked. And we could glass the planet from orbit in 6 hours. Ragnarok cannons could crack the crust. We could end this war today. Chen was silent for a long moment. Every person on the bridge knew what she was thinking. The easy way would save Coalition lives. One order, and the Zelthari threat would be erased forever. Captain Rivera's voice came over the command channel. Admiral, my Marines are ready for ground assault. We can do this the hard way. Chen looked at the planet again. She thought about the massacre 18 months ago. She thought about Admiral Chen from before, the one who had believed in compassion and mercy. She thought about what that version of herself would choose. The hard way, she said finally. We're going in. Her executive officer looked shocked. Ma'am, the casualties will be enormous. Why risk our people for theirs? Chen turned to face him. Because if we become like them, then what was the point? They attacked us because they thought compassion made us weak. If we prove them right, they win even in death. Not everyone agreed. Captain David Park, commander of the cruiser Vengeance, opened a private channel. Admiral, with respect, my entire family died in the massacre. Every single person I loved. And you're asking me to risk my life to save Zelthari civilians? I'm not asking, Chen replied. I'm ordering. If you can't follow that order, I'll relieve you of command. Park was silent for a moment. No, ma'am. I'll follow orders. But I want it on record that I disagree. Noted, Chen said. Now get your ship in position. We have a planet to invade. The orbital assault began with massive bombardment of military targets. Ragnarok cannons fired at minimum power, destroying the orbital fortresses without damaging the planet itself. Fighter craft swept through space hunting down defense satellites. The Zelthari fleet rose to meet them. The battle above the planet was fierce but short. The Zelthari were outnumbered and outgunned. Within 4 hours, the Coalition controlled orbit. But the real fight would be on the ground. 200,000 Marines and Allied soldiers prepared for the largest ground assault in human history. They would drop into Zelthari cities and fight their way to the High Command's citadel. The Zelthari had planned for this. Their strategy was cruel but effective. They positioned their military forces inside civilian populations. They set up weapons platforms on top of hospitals and schools. They dared humanity to fire. Captain Rivera's battalion dropped into the capital city of Zelthar Major. His landing pod slammed into a plaza surrounded by towering buildings. Enemy fire erupted immediately. Rivera's Marines took cover and returned fire, but the situation was a nightmare. Zelthari soldiers were shooting from windows of residential buildings. Civilians ran screaming through the streets caught in the crossfire. Precision fire only, Rivera shouted. Check your targets. It made the fighting 10 times harder. Human soldiers had to identify threats while avoiding civilians. The Zelthari had no such restrictions. They shot at anything that moved, using their own people as cover. Rivera watched one of his Marines, a young woman named Sarah Chen, related to the Admiral, hesitate when a Zelthari soldier ran behind a group of civilians. The delay cost her. Enemy fire struck her armor and she went down. Rivera dragged her to cover. Her armor had absorbed most of the impact, but she was injured. I had the shot, she gasped. But the civilians... You did the right thing, Rivera told her. Stay here, medic. The fighting continued street by street, building by building. Progress was measured in meters. Each block took hours to secure. The Marines had to clear every structure carefully, always aware that civilians might be hiding inside. Other units faced similar struggles. The Avathari pilots couldn't use heavy weapons from the air without hitting civilians. The Kryn medical teams worked frantically to save wounded soldiers and civilians alike. The Zelthari military used every dirty trick they could think of. They dressed soldiers in civilian clothing. They hid weapons in schools and hospitals. They took hostages and used them as shields. But something unexpected began to happen. Zelthari civilians saw how the humans fought. They watched human soldiers risk their lives to avoid civilian casualties. They saw wounded Marines pull Zelthari children out of collapsed buildings. They witnessed humans giving their own medical supplies to injured civilians. The civilians began to realize something. These humans were trying not to kill them. In a residential district, Rivera's unit was pinned down by Zelthari military forces, firing from an apartment complex. The building was full of civilians. Rivera refused to call in heavy weapons. Then something remarkable happened. Civilians in the building started hanging white sheets from windows. They were marking which apartments had civilians and which had soldiers. "They're helping us," Rivera's lieutenant said in amazement. "Take note of every apartment with white sheets," Rivera ordered. "Focus fire on the others." Within an hour, the apartment complex was secured. Zelthari civilians came out with their hands up, but instead of fear, some showed gratitude. An elderly Zelthari woman approached Rivera. Through his translator, she said, "You could have destroyed the building. Why didn't you?" "Because you're not our enemy," Rivera replied. "Your government is." Word spread through the city. The humans were different. They weren't the monsters the High Command had described. A resistance movement formed. Zelthari civilians began hiding coalition soldiers. They provided intelligence on military positions. They sabotaged their own government's defenses. The High Command responded by executing civilians they suspected of helping the humans. This backfired completely. More civilians turned against their government. Admiral Chen received reports from the ground. The invasion was working, but slowly. Casualties were high because her forces were fighting carefully. Every day, hundreds of coalition soldiers died rather than use tactics that would kill civilians. "Is it worth it?" her executive officer asked again. Chen watched footage of human Marines distributing food to Zelthari refugees. She saw Morn engineers helping repair damaged civilian infrastructure. She watched Avathari medics treating wounded Zelthari children. "Yes," she said quietly, "because this is who we are. This is what they tried to destroy. We're proving they failed." After 2 months of brutal urban warfare, coalition forces finally reached the High Command citadel. It was a fortress built into a mountain with walls 30 meters thick and weapons covering every approach. The High Command broadcast a final message. "We will never surrender. We will fight until every last Zelthari is dead. Better death than submission to lesser species." But they were wrong about one thing. Not every Zelthari agreed. The citadel's main gate opened from the inside. Zelthari military officers who were tired of the madness had staged a coup. They killed the guards and invited the coalition forces inside. Captain Rivera led his Marines through the gate, weapons ready. They expected a trap. Instead, they found Zelthari soldiers standing at attention, their weapons on the ground. "We surrender," their leader said, "on behalf of all sane Zelthari. This war was wrong. Our High Command was wrong. Please stop the killing." Rivera studied them carefully. "Where is your High Command?" "The inner citadel. They've sealed themselves inside. They're preparing to fight to the death." Rivera's forces surrounded the inner citadel. He tried to negotiate surrender, but the High Command refused to respond. They were true believers. They would rather die than admit defeat. The final assault took 3 days. Marines fought through corridors designed as killing zones. Every room was trapped. Every corner hid an ambush. The High Command's elite guards fought with religious fervor. Captain Rivera lost a quarter of his battalion in those 3 days. Good soldiers died in the darkness of that cursed fortress. Finally, his unit breached the command chamber. The Zelthari High Archon stood among his dead guards, wounded but still defiant. Rivera aimed his weapon at the Archon. "It's over, surrender." The Archon laughed, blood bubbling from his mouth. "You've won nothing, human. Your compassion will destroy you. The galaxy is full of predators worse than us. They'll see your mercy as weakness. They'll do to you what we did, and you'll fall because you can't help being soft. Maybe, Rivera said, but we'll face them as ourselves, not as monsters. Fool, the Archon whispered. You could have been great. You could have ruled the galaxy. But you chose to be weak. He reached for a weapon. Rivera fired once. The Archon fell. The war was over. Outside the Citadel, Rivera stood among his exhausted Marines. They had fought for months. They had seen friends die. They had suffered wounds that would never fully heal, but they had won. And they had won without becoming the monsters they fought. Rivera looked up at the sky where coalition ships orbited peacefully. He thought about his wife and daughters, dead 18 months now. He wondered if they would be proud of what he had done. He decided they would be. The war officially ended 28 months after the first Zelthari attack. The memorial service was held on Earth, in the same plaza where the UN Space Council had voted to send the rescue mission. Admiral Chen stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of thousands attended in person. Billions watched across human space and the growing coalition. Behind her, a wall displayed the names of the dead. 89,000 military personnel, 47,000 civilians from the initial massacre. Each name represented a life, a story, a family that would forever have an empty chair at the table. Chen's voice was steady as she spoke. We were tested. The Zelthari wanted to know if our compassion made us weak. They struck us when we were most vulnerable, when we had opened our hearts and our hands in friendship. She paused and looked at the memorial wall. We learned that day that trust has a price, that mercy can be used as a weapon against us, that there are species in the galaxy who see kindness as an invitation to attack. The crowd was silent. Some wept quietly. But we also proved something, Chen continued, her voice growing stronger. We proved that compassion is not weakness, that mercy is not the same as submission. We fought back with everything we had. We became weapons of war when we needed to, but we never became monsters. She gestured to the crowd, where former Zelthari citizens stood alongside humans and other coalition species. We could have exterminated them. We had the power. We had the justification. They had slaughtered our people without mercy. We could have done the same, but we didn't, Chen said, because that's not who we are. We are humans. We choose compassion even when it costs us. We choose mercy even when it's hard. We remain ourselves even when others try to change us into something dark. The crowd began to applaud, softly at first, then building to thunder. Chen raised her hand for silence. But let me be clear. We have learned. We will never again trust without verification. We will never again approach the unknown without being prepared to defend ourselves. The age of innocence is over. Humanity has grown up. She looked directly at the cameras broadcasting across known space. To any species watching this, understand what we are. We are capable of great compassion and terrible violence. We prefer the former. We excel at both, the choice of which you see is yours to make. Chen stepped away from the podium. The ceremony continued with speeches from other leaders, but her words were the ones that everyone remembered. The Terran doctrine was formalized in the months that followed. It became the cornerstone of humanity's approach to the galaxy. The doctrine was simple. Humanity would offer help to those who needed it. Humanity would extend friendship to those who sought it. But humanity would ruthlessly punish betrayal. Any species that used humanity's compassion against them would face complete and total destruction. It was mercy with teeth. Kindness backed by strength. The former Zelthari Empire was reorganized. The High Command was gone, executed or imprisoned. The remaining Zelthari government was democratic, monitored by the coalition. They would rebuild, but under supervision. More importantly, reparations were required. Zelthari scientists and engineers worked alongside humans to share technology. Former Zelthari military officers helped train coalition forces. The species that had tried to enslave humanity now worked to strengthen it. Some humans struggled with this. Captain David Park, who had lost his family, requested transfer away from any unit working with Zelthari. His request was granted with understanding, but others, like Captain Rivera, chose differently. He accepted a position training the new Zelthari Defense Force. His reasoning was simple. If we don't teach them to be better, he said, then what was the point of all those deaths? Admiral Chen retired from active service after the war. She was offered positions in government, but she declined. Instead, she wrote a book about her experiences. She called it The Cost of Trust. The book became required reading at military academies across coalition space. It told the story of the war from her perspective, the hope of first contact, the devastation of betrayal, the difficult choices of war, the price of maintaining humanity. One passage was particularly famous. They thought they could use our best qualities against us. They thought compassion made us easy prey. They learned too late that humans are capable of choosing kindness from a position of strength, not weakness. When you force humans to fight, you discover what they really are. And what we are is survivors who refuse to surrender our souls even in the darkest moments. The coalition of free species grew in the years after the war. More species joined, seeking protection and partnership. Humanity took its place as a major galactic power, respected and feared in equal measure. The Morn became humanity's closest allies. They remembered that humans had freed them when they had nothing to gain from it. The Avathari and Kryn integrated deeply into coalition society. Former enemies became trusted friends. Other galactic powers watched with interest and concern. There were older, stronger civilizations out there. Some saw humanity as a threat. Others saw opportunity. All of them recognized that something new had emerged on the galactic stage. 3 years after the war, the Pan-Solar Communications Array detected another distress signal. It came from a species called the Yendari, claiming their world was dying from environmental collapse. They needed sanctuary and help. The debate that followed was intense. Some argued humanity should ignore it. The Zelthari had taught them that distress calls could be traps. Better to stay safe, stay isolated. Others argued that ignoring cries for help would mean the Zelthari had won. They would have succeeded in changing humanity into something cold and closed. Admiral Chen, now a civilian advisor, was asked to testify before the Concordat Council. She stood before the assembly and spoke carefully. The Zelthari attacked us because they thought compassion was weakness, she said. If we become afraid to show compassion, then they were right. They will have successfully turned us into a species ruled by fear rather than hope. But what if it's another trap? A counselor asked. Chen smiled slightly. Then we'll deal with it. But this time we go prepared. We send help, but we send it protected. We offer aid, but we verify everything. We remain human, but we remain ready. The vote was close, but ultimately the decision was made. Humanity would respond to the Yendari distress call. The fleet that was assembled was different from the one that had met the Zelthari. It carried food, medicine, and habitat modules. But it also carried warships. Medical vessels traveled alongside destroyers. Supply ships flew in formation with carriers. The message was clear. Humanity would help. But humanity would never again be unprepared. Captain Rivera, promoted to admiral after the war, commanded the fleet. He stood on his bridge as they prepared to depart and thought about everything that had happened. He thought about his wife and daughters, dead now for 3 years. He thought about the Zelthari who had killed them. He thought about the Zelthari civilians he had saved during the invasion. He thought about the price of remaining human in an inhuman galaxy. Admiral, his communications officer said, "The fleet is ready, awaiting your orders." Rivera looked at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there the Yendari waited. Were they truly in need, or was this another trap? There was only one way to find out. "Send this message to the Yendari," Rivera ordered. "Tell them we're coming to help. Tell them we're humans from Earth. Tell them we believe in compassion and we believe in protecting those who need protection." He paused, then added, "And tell them we also believe in destroying those who betray trust. Tell them to choose wisely which kind of humans they want to meet." The message was sent. The fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the darkness between stars. Back on Earth, the memorial wall still stood in the plaza, names carved in stone remembering those who had died for humanity's choice to remain compassionate even when it hurt. But next to the memorial, a new monument had been built. It was a simple stone with words carved deep. "We are human. We choose kindness from strength, not weakness. We offer mercy, but we demand it be honored. We will help those who need help. We will destroy those who abuse that help. We are compassionate. We are fierce. We are both, always." Below those words was a single sentence that had become humanity's promise to the galaxy. "Test us at your own risk." Children played in the plaza around the monuments. They didn't fully understand what the stones meant yet, but they would. Every human child learned the story of the Zelthari War. They learned about the cost of trust and the price of remaining true to yourself. They learned that being human meant being strong enough to be kind. even when the galaxy punished you for it. Across coalition space on 100 different worlds, former slaves looked up at the stars and saw human ships passing overhead. They remembered their liberation. They remembered the species that had fought for them when they had nothing to offer in return. And on Zelthar Prime, in the rebuilt capital city, a young Zelthari student read Admiral Chen's book for a school assignment. She came to the passage about compassion and strength, about humans choosing to save Zelthari civilians when it would have been easier to let them die. She thought about what her people had done. She thought about what the humans had done in response. She thought about the future. Then she wrote in her essay, "My people learned that mercy is not weakness, it is a choice. And humans taught us that those who force others to stop being merciful will discover what true strength looks like. I hope we never forget this lesson." Her teacher, a human volunteer helping to rebuild Zelthari education, read the essay and gave it the highest marks. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it, not by conquering, not by dominating, but by refusing to become something less than human. Even when the cost was written in blood, the stars waited. Other species watched. New challenges would come, but humanity faced them with clear eyes and steady hearts. They knew who they were. They knew what they valued. They knew the price they had paid to remain themselves. And they knew they would pay it again if they had to, because that's what humans do.